I want to go ahead and thank everybody for taking the time out of their busy schedule to come down and listen to this. And hopefully we'll give you some good information. I know a lot of you guys have some...
I'm going to pass the sign sheet around again.
You guys have some work already with manifestation. So I may not be telling you some new things, but maybe we can clarify some points. So, you know, just talking about behaviors and manifestations, I mean, I know sometimes at schools we have some behaviors in school, and we want to make sure this doesn't happen to you. Knowing a lot of the assistant principals that I know out there, and it's funny how they say there's a behavior out there, and say, hey, we have somebody that vandalized the bathroom, okay? And there was 3 kids, we don't know who it is, we're trying to figure it out. Then it's usually your assistant principal that's really out there with all the kids. They come in, they go, don't even worry about it. I know these kids that did it. I have little Johnny Ray, that's my little snitch. He let me know it's Manny, it's Mo, and it's Jack. And the principal looks at you, oh yeah, Manny, Mo, and Jack, huh? You know Jack is a special ed student, right? So then that assistant principal, oh no, please tell me he's not a, and starts crying profusely. We want to make sure that you don't feel like that, guys. Because remember, the students still have to follow our rules and regulations. The only thing different is that they do have a due process right, and we do have to follow regulations to make sure that we have everything in place to make sure they're most successful, okay? And that's sometimes where it gets kind of hard, because you're not dealing with just you, you're dealing with teachers, you're dealing with related service staff. All this stuff comes into play. So we're going to try to kind of walk you through things that how, hey, if there does a behavior come up, and if we have to go to this manifestation, this would be the best way to make sure that we give the kid their due process right. But it doesn't mean that we can never suspend a kid with special ed. If somebody ever tells you that, they're wrong, okay? But they're right when they say they are protected under due process law and rights, okay? So we'll kind of go over that now.
Did you go over all these?
I don't know.
Okay, so let's try to pass out.
No.
Okay, so our objectives are to make sure we understand the IDEA laws behind the discipline of students in special ed, including the manifest determination. Understanding what this means for gifted students, or students who are gifted, I should say. Understand the need to put incident reports into Synergy for all students, and understand the need to provide services for any days above the first 10 days of suspension.
And we'll kind of make sure we have all that. If you guys have any questions, this goes a lot better with your participation. Say, hey, what about this situation, that situation, and we'll give you the best answer as possible that at least we understand the federal government to give us. Okay.
So the basic intent of the manifest determination IEP meeting is to ensure school districts are not discriminating against students with disabilities. That being said, you know, a lot of people think, well, this kid's in trouble all the time, he must be special ed. And that's not always true. So just making sure that this is that step between when they get in trouble and when they actually can go for long term that protects them if they are in special ed. So these are the IDEA laws with their references of why we need to hold a manifestation after the 10th day of suspension. So the first one just says, if there's a removal for more than 10 consecutive days, so they bring a gun, it's an automatic 10 days pending a long term. So then you do a manifest. And a series of suspensions that constitute 10 days. So let's say the kid gets in trouble 2 days for cussing out a teacher, or 3 days for poking a girl in the hallway. You've got 5 days. Then they bring a gun, you do the 10. You've got 5 days to have that manifest in, but they have 10 days of suspension pending that long term. So that would be a constitutive pattern that totals more than 10 school days. And then the IDEA states that an IEP team must come together to determine the relationship between a student's disability and that incident when we're looking at changing their placement.
And remember, yes.
A quick question.
Of course.
Am I understanding that the student is not allowed to return until that manifestation meeting is held with parents? So like.
No, the suspension day, he has to come back. No, but you need to have that manifestation as soon as possible. So let's not get in the habit of saying, okay, we're gonna have a manifest, but we're not gonna have the parent come in for another 12 days. We try to get them as soon as possible. So what we would do is, the only time you have to do a manifestation, remember, is when you as an administrator know you're gonna go past that 10 days. As soon as you know you're gonna go past that 10 days, you set up that meeting, you get those parents in there as soon as you can, because that's their due process right. So let's say a first one, for whatever reason, he had 5 suspensions his first time, and this next one's gonna go into that 6th day, okay? You have that, now you know I'm going past my 10 days. Now you're gonna set up that manifestation, you have that manifestation, now you have that and you determine, hey, is it due to disability or is it not? Let's say it was due that, hey, it's due to his disability. He comes back to school the next day, okay? Now, you may not wanna use your full 10, technically you can keep him out until that 9th day, 10th day, but you may not wanna do that if it was due to his disability. That's an option. A lot of times when that happens, the kid is already past his 10 days when we do that, so that we have to bring him back that very next day. And then you want to save some of those days a little bit because it lets you work with the student. So yeah, so that's, you should do it as soon as you can, as soon as you know. You're required to do that actually, as soon as you know you're going over that 10th day. Not, you don't go over it, but as soon as you, and don't have a manifest before that. Don't have a manifest if he's not going to be suspended more than 10 days. Because then I'll go there and I'll sit down and I'll say, and this has happened. Kid's only been suspended 8 days. I want to get a jump on him. No, we can't do that. That's not what it's intended for. And that's just not knowing. I don't think they were being, they just wanted, hey, if we can get a head jump on this, let's do it. But we have to wait till we know he's going to be gone more than that 10th day. Doesn't even have to be a long-term suspension. If we're going over that 10th day, we need to determine if it was due to disability or not. And we need to provide, if it does go over those 10 days, and we keep them out, that we're going to provide compensation. Okay? And we'll kind of go over that again.
So this one says the implications for students who are gifted. Although students who are gifted do have an IEP, the manifest process does not apply to them unless they have a dual exceptionality. So if they're emotionally disturbed and gifted, or speech language impaired and gifted, but if they're strictly just a student that's gifted, they don't have to have a manifestation. Because the question, the 2 questions that we'll look at in a little bit kind of lead people to, well, that makes sense. Because the first question says, does the conduct in question have anything direct and substantially related to their disability? So if they brought a gun, did they bring a gun because they're gifted? So when you look at the manifestation question, it doesn't make sense, right?
Well, to some parents it will,
Yeah.
and they will argue that point. And it's funny how, and I'm not trying to pick on it, but it's the gifted kids are never special ed until it comes to this point. They say, oh wait, my kid is special ed. So this is the time that I do hear those parents come in and say, wait a minute, it may be due to his disability, but we'll deal with that. So if you tell them, you just let them know, no, the manifest doesn't fall with you, and then just send them to us and we'll have that discussion with them. So when you have this meeting, you're in there. There's 2 basic questions you have to answer. What Karen stated earlier, hey, was it due to the student's disability? And, or was it because we failed to implement the IEP or the behavior intervention plan? Those are the only 2 questions we really need to answer. And I say that saying, hey, we don't walk in that room and say, hey, is it due to the disability? No. Is it due to us not following the IP? No, we're done. Goodbye. We have to actually answer those questions with informed information. And if you go there, and if you don't click this one, but on your sheet, there's a list of all those things we should go over. If those of you that have sat in Manifest,
Behind the PowerPoint in your
it's
packet.
there for you. You just follow down. Hey, we look at previous behaviors. We look at the IEP. We look at the BIP. We look at behaviors at the home. We look at grades. We look at attendance. And it's just a check mark that hey, these are things that we've discussed in that meeting. Okay? And if you do that in a good process, that does bring up good discussion and say, hey, wait a minute. I was thinking one way, I might think this other way now. But that's the idea why we talk about that. Okay? So we do that. If you ever feel you're going to have dissension amongst group members, it is, and I know everybody's pressed for time, but I always say, hey, if you know somebody's going to disagree in there, you might want to have a staffing beforehand, so you're not having that in front of the parents. If you sit and talk about 30, 40 minutes or whatever it takes you guys, maybe one person would sway the other side one way or the other. I've seen it happen both ways. I've seen it happen where they said, hey, yeah, it is due to disability, and where it was saying, oh no, after reviewing it, it's not due to disability. So I've seen that kind of work both ways. Yes, sir.
So who has the final decision?
So the final decision to say so is that administrator. Now, you could, at any point, you could have everybody at your table say, hey, it's due to disability. That is the heavy hat you guys wear. We're gonna say, no, it is due to disability, we're gonna move forward with it. You have that final, it's a team decision, but you have that final, somebody has to make it. And at that point, you're gathering all this information and you're gonna make that determination. Now, what my role is, hopefully, and I've worked with a lot of you guys, is really I try to just get the information out there and I say, hey, okay, what are we gonna go from here? I will make suggestions, hey, look, if the whole team is saying it's due to disability, you might wanna go with that, because if the parent makes a state complaint, that's not gonna look good. They say, wait a minute, everybody on your team felt it was due to disability and you chose to go this route. And I know it's hard for administrators because you have to go back to your school and it doesn't look good on you if you have a kid that had done something bad and they end up going to school the next day. I understand that, but that's just what we have to look at. I try to give you advice, and so does all the other coordinators, to try to keep you guys out of hot water. If it gets to that, because when it gets to a state complaint, those of you that are involved, it's a lot of time, a lot of effort, it gets ugly. So we try to keep you out of that. And if we go into that, because it happens, we just want to make sure that we're standing on a good firm and say, no, parents, we did everything that we're supposed to with this kid, okay? So ultimately, you're the principals at the school, you're the LEA. It's the LEAs, I guess, at your thing. So also be careful, your LEAs, especially in the manifest, there should be a principal there. I wouldn't give that responsibility to your leads.
I've gone to I won't do a manifest unless I have a building administrator there, even though at an IEP, it might be my lead that's the LEA. At the manifestations, I want an administrator there because it is such a big, I mean, it's a big thing. We're at this point, we're having a manifestation that needs to be an administrator
And
there.
I think we're pretty good at that. I haven't been to very, many that there's just been the lead at the school, which they're very valuable, don't get me wrong. But I think at that point, you need to really step in there and say, okay, we're at some point, somebody's gonna have to make a decision and it's gonna be me, okay? But I do recommend, if you feel there's gonna be a disagreement, maybe talk to the staff beforehand so we can go in united. And again, if you're looking at the evaluation, like one time I was at a manifest and we had a kid, I don't know if we should talk about this. Let's go a little bit, I'll give you that information later. But that answered that question, yeah, we were understood there? Okay.
So on there, it says the checklist to be used, so you have the checklist in your packet. They don't have to print it out, but if they have it electronically that is there, we can discuss, look at, that's fine. But a copy of the most recent IEP, their evaluations, the discipline history within Synergy, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that most recent incident, that report. We should have a meeting invitation and a prior written for every manifestation, so those are things that case managers, leads should have ready for those meetings. And then we also need to make sure that we're submitting those signature pages from those manifestations downtown to be scanned and put in the system, because it never fails. We get a state complaint, they want the IEP, they want the signature pages, and we go into the historical documents and we don't have those signature pages from the IEPs. So I've been taking the manifest signature pages back with me when I leave a meeting, so that I know, I take them, I give them to the girl who's scanning them, and they get in. Because there were IEPs I was looking for this year in a state complaint, and I couldn't find the signature pages anywhere.
And I don't do that because I don't trust myself, but, and it just depends who you work with, but I don't, usually they'll say, hey, KJ, no, because I'm not going back to the office, I want to make my rounds around different schools, and I just didn't want that to.
And
Be
we
my
just,
fault.
last year when he had taken a break from our department, it was just something that amongst ourselves, the coordinators had decided we were gonna do, and so I take them. And even if I don't go back to the office, I stick them in my notebook that I do take in the office every time, and as soon as I'm walking, when I go to my office, I walk past where it needs to be scanned, so I stick them in, I go to my office. So it's just that making sure that they're there. So just encouraging your leads or case managers to make sure they do send those signature pages downtown for IEPs as well. I'm making sure on the manifestations, but.
You ready?
Okay. So if either of the answers to those two questions, was it related, direct and substantially related to the disability, or was it a failure to implement the IEP? If the answer to either one of those is yes, then the behavior is a manifestation of their disability. If the answers to those questions are no, then they can be disciplined just like their non-disabled general ed peers, but we must provide services during that removal.
Okay. So then again, we're looking at things, remember, when you're looking at if it's a manifestation of the student's disability, you're looking at those questions. Hey, does he have a current IEP? So if we go into a meeting, we say, does he have a current IEP? Say, oh, we've been trying to get the mother in, and this happened. We couldn't get her in here, we couldn't get her in here, so our IEP is out of date by 4 days. At that point, I'm gonna say that we're not following the IEP. Why? Because the student doesn't have one. So we can't follow that. So that already says it's due to the manifestation of the student's disability, we can't follow it. So the kid comes back the next day, now we have to rush to get that parent in. Here's a question, here's what I always tell everybody, and this is good for this situation, is that you know what? All your IEPs should try to be conducted 2 months before they're due. Because that allows time for if a parent has to cancel, if we have to cancel for some reason, sometimes we can't make it, or a teacher gets sick or something, we can cancel that. That allows you that time. Now, if the parent doesn't show up after we've invited them, we've emailed them, we sent them letters, they said they're gonna come, and they don't show up, guess what? It is within our right to have that IEP for that child, because we need to stay compliant and make sure they have an IEP moving forward. Usually if a parent or a teacher asks me, or an administrator asks me about that, I'll send them regulations that we follow. Usually I try to do that. I'll say, hey, this is not me just saying this, here's the federal or the state reg that says that this is why we can do that. Yes, sir?
If the student is in the SAT process, do they fall under the SPED umbrella?
Yes. So meaning this.
Short answer, yes.
So meaning this, I don't know if you want to answer this. So we can still move forward with the infraction in question, and obviously they don't have a disability. But where that protection comes in is that we still have to, if they go over that 10 days, we still have to provide them that service. And their service is general ed. I mean, we have to make sure that they're getting their education. And to me, that's where that umbrella kind of falls.
The only time it really differs is if they're already SAT 2 and you have already collected assigned consent for them to be in SAT 3, looking at evaluation, then we do have to expedite the evaluation. But they can still go to long-term hearing, they can go to Crossroads, but we would expedite that evaluation.
Right. And Crossroads will give them that general ed setting. You see that? See, a general ed kid, you can send home and he doesn't have to go to Crossroads. We don't have, we do provide that for them, but we don't have to. With our special ed kid, we would have to, hey, yes, you're gonna come here, we're gonna still give you your general ed support that you need. Does that kind of make sense?
You're saying that if a kid's in SAT, you still gotta do a manifest, is that what you're
No.
saying? If a kid's in
Because you
SAT.
can't answer the questions on the manifest on a kid in SAT.
So, but you would proceed as usual. But we have to start making sure that we get that evaluation done as soon as possible. So, okay, let's go to, that's one thing, in evaluation as well, if we're late on our reevaluation, that again could be, wait a minute, then if we're basing our IEPs off an evaluation, and you don't have a current evaluation, then guess what, we're out of compliance. So those are things that are not always just dealing with kids with behaviors, that's with all our special ed students. That's why we really kind of press so hard at having all that stuff done in a timely manner. Your evaluations, your IEPs, we push that, because guess what? Usually, your students with some of the behaviors, they're the ones we have this hard time with having parents come in and doing that. So maybe that has something to do with some of the behaviors that they have. But remember, if you try to do it 2 months out, that allows you time to say, okay, we're gonna cancel it, but we're gonna start it here. That gives that parent that opportunity to make those changes. If they intend up not coming up, and we've documented, there's a lot of places we can document this on the IEP. In Synergy, parent contact log, your invitation pages you send out,
Cover page and
cover pages, all that stuff. If we go into a due process, instead of me calling you, all I have to do is pull that stuff up, and I could, here we go. We have all this information already and documented in our system, okay?
So I want to go to the 2 examples we gave earlier in regards to where it could be related to the disability. I gave one earlier, right at the end of the year, I had a manifest at a school, and 2 weeks before the manifest, the young lady, they had an IEP for the young lady, and at that IEP they discussed that she was only SLD, specific learning disabled, but at that IEP they discussed that there was just something going on with her. Her behaviors were off, her attitude was off, she was acting depressed, all of that, and so they decided as a team, they felt like maybe there was something going on and they wanted to look at a psych eval or a mental health assessment, seeing if she needed social work services. 2 weeks later, one day, she got in a fight, so she did her 3-day suspension, we didn't have to do it. Then the second one, she had drugs, and it was her second drug offense, like the day she came back. So we get to the manifestation where they're looking at the questions, is it related, directly and substantially related to the disability? Well, that current diagnosed disability at that time, specific learning disabled? No. But there's that IEP that I'm looking at that says, oh, well, we think something else is going on. We're going to do a new evaluation to look if she might be emotionally disturbed. I had to say, okay, we can't say if it's due to a disability or not, because now you guys have documented that you think there's something else going on. So it is it could be directly related to the disability, or there's a disability we don't know. So we did call it due to the student's disability.
So along with that, I'm gonna give you a different scenario where the parent tried to say, hey, wait a minute, they need a different evaluation. Huh?
Didn't you say it was drugs?
Yeah, but there's this disability, an unknown disability.
But if it was drugs, then okay, we'll go into special circumstances with the drugs.
Yeah.
So okay, so that's fine, you could say that for that, but now you can get into that special circumstance, and we'll get into that. So yeah, you're right, you did say it was drugs, so there's something we can still do for that situation, we'll get into that later. Let me talk about a scenario that I went through. There was a situation where a kid, again, had brought the weapon, okay? And it was a knife, and he was an AU kid. And I've already talked to the parent before this, and the parent always would say, everything my son does is due to the disability. That's him. He's that as a person. His AU is him as a person. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna argue with the parent when the parent just talked to me. That's fine. Well, we come into the situation, and it was a kid had brought a knife to school, had it in his backpack. Well, he had the foremost to get the teacher alone so he can stab her or whatever, This is his thought, it's in his head. So you see this on film. He plans it out, he puts there, looks around, talks to the teacher, hey, can I go to the restroom? Okay, well, he takes his backpack with him, goes out there. It's all on video. Well, when he gets out to the hallways, teachers, hey, she goes out there, starts talking to him. Then he goes down, pulls it out on her. She did a little thing too. She did an amazing job of getting out of the situation. The camera saw it. When you locked down the school, everybody was safe. So now we have to have principals, of course, furious, and I would be too. This kid, we're a long-term risk kid. We need to set up manifest right now. I go, okay, we gotta make sure you're not doing this because the parents are going strong with that one. And I go, okay, and I don't know this at the time, so I'm telling I went to the social worker at the time. I said, listen, I need you to read that evaluation that this kid had. And we're gonna make the argument, I don't know, you need to read it and I'll ask you questions. She went, she read it, we came, we had discussed it, but we found out that all the stuff that this kid does was impulsive. That's what the evaluation said. Yes, he was autistic, but everything that his behavior were really impulsive. So then we went to the meeting, they had their advocate, we were there, and then parent right away, this is due to disability, the kid's autistic, that means everything he does is dealing with his disability. So the social worker said, well, let's look at the evaluations, things that he's that he doesn't really have control of. We talked about compulse, we did this, straight with evaluation. So we determined that, hey, this is not due to his disability off the information that we have. So the mother goes, okay, because they try to get it sometimes. I want to test it. Awesome, we'll test it. I go, but we're basing our decision off the information we have now. Nobody had told us that he actually had a current evaluation. Nobody has told us he had this issue before. So if you would have came to us before, or if the teachers would have seen this before, that's different. That's what Taryn was talking about. But a parent can't just say all of a sudden, okay, I want my kid tested. No, we can only go off the information we know. So the advocate was there, we looked at each other, and she said, okay, touche, Mr. Padilla, you got us on that one. In her head, I'm sure that's what she said. And I get along with a lot of the advocates. I mean, and that's the way it should be, actually. I mean, we're trying to do the best thing for the kid. And then she looks at the parents and she says, listen, this is what they're saying. Blah, 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 and guess what? We don't have anywhere documented that he has this kind of rage and he's doing this. That's something that we believe he does have now. They're gonna test for it, but we have to move forward with what they need. And I was like, oh, baby. So she helped us out there. We went, we did a long-term suspension for the kid for the year because that was appropriate at the time. And we got him evaluated and we'll move forward from there. So that was just kind of a little bit of a different situation. So I'm going to go into the 3 different situations. I think we're ready for that now. That it doesn't matter if it's due to the disability or not.
Well, we didn't talk about that behavior.
She'll do that real quick, I'm sorry.
So, in your packet, also behind that checklist that we looked at earlier, is a flow chart for when to look at conducting an FBA, a functional behavior assessment, and or if needed from that data, a behavior intervention plan. Last year, we were under audit from the PED in regards to our manifestations, indicator 4A and 4B, which we'll go into in a little bit, and how we were doing manifestations and how we were doing functional behavior assessments and behavior intervention plans. So our former lead psychologist, Dr. Martin Greer, and our lead special ed social worker, Angela Mirabal, created this kind of flow chart that if it's due to their disability, if it's not, and when you should do an FBA and when you should do a BIP. And we're going to be doing some in-depth training with our leads and our teachers In the fall, we did have a training yesterday, there were 2 sessions, and there were teachers from a lot of schools here, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, who did kind of get a leg up on that, but this is just for you guys to kind of look at when we should do an FBA and a BIP coming out of a manifestation. But that doesn't mean that if you see a kid that's had a pattern of behavior at school, and you want to get a leg up on that, that you couldn't have an IEP and request an FBA ahead of time. Because that FBA is to help kind of prevent the kid from making further bad decisions and getting in further trouble. So having that FBA done earlier is not, there's nothing wrong with that. And then not every FBA leads to a behavior intervention plan. You know, you can go through the questions in an FBA and it says, is it a skill deficit or a performance deficit? And do you need a behavior intervention plan? Sometimes a kid brings a knife or gun once and never does it again. It's not a pattern of behavior, it's a serious offense, but do they need a behavior plan for that? Not necessarily.
And that'll be the team decision to decide if they need that or not. So then we want to kind of look at what 3 things we can do regardless if it's due to disability or not. And there's 3 things. Okay, there's the drugs. There's also weapons. And then you have serious bodily harm. I have never been in a situation with seriously bodily harm, and I hope I never do. That is severe. That means you lost use of a limb. I mean, and again, I usually tell people, it's not that I agree with this, but I will follow what federal regulation says. I don't believe that you should be able to beat somebody up until they lose their sight. I mean, no, I don't agree with that, but that's what federal regulation states, and my job is to make sure that you guys are informed and following the federal regulations. Does that make sense? So we have those 3. Now, drugs, again, we've had very many there. You still have to do your FBA, and it may or may not warrant a behavior intervention plan. Now, your weapons, here's always the sticky information with the weapons, and it's those dang knives. Because then, well, you're trying to measure this and okay. So a pocket knife, you know, it's the people that, you know, just everyday things. They have put in something there to protect those students that, hey, you know what, I was working with my grandpa all weekend, and I used to have this in my backpack. And I hear that a lot. And I don't know if they just think I'm soft on grandpa, because that's the excuse I always hear. But it is, it's a little knife and they didn't mean nothing. No, they didn't tell us about it. Somebody else saw it and told us, but still, if the blade itself is no longer than 2.5 inches, then we will not do a 45-day placement.
On a pocket knife.
On a pocket knife. Yes, on a pocket knife. Now, they have a switchblade that's not a pocket knife. Just because it fits in your pocket, don't mean it's a pocket knife. So if they have something like that, yes, we're definitely going to charge that as a weapon. Okay? Now, as I say this, don't use a 45-day placement if it's not due to the student's disability. Go for the full year. Does that make sense? If we're going to say it's not due to the disability, suspend them for the year. Treat them like you would anybody else. But if for whatever reason we come in there and we say it's due to the disability, 45-day placement. You know, 45. And there can be sometimes when a kid brings something to school that they may not know the rights and wrong. And you're looking at some of those kids that are ID, not all of them, but you may have a kid that's in the bad neighborhood or a bad family, and he brings it, and he's an ID kid. I'm just giving you an example. I've never been part of that. But I'm just saying that's where it could be where you bring a weapon to school that may be part of his disability. But if it's not due to the disability, guys, go for the full year. Don't do the 45-day placement. 45-day placement is put there to protect us just in case they say, hey, it's due to disability, but we can't have the kid in our school right now. We have to move, and I say that for middle school and high school. Elementary, we don't have a place. You'll have to find a designated place in your school. Okay? Does that make sense with drugs, weapons, and serious bodily harm? Okay. Any questions so far with things we've kind of been going over? Any scenarios maybe? Yes, ma'am.
Dennis, FBAs and BIPs, can we have those for regular students as well?
Yes, you can. And that's good. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to make that streamlined a little bit, where it's not always, the people doing it are not necessarily only your mental health providers, but it really is getting a whole team concept going, so everybody's responsible and everybody will find better ways. And if you're talking different teachers, they're coming together, guess what? You're gonna find out a lot more about that kid. And I know you're not saying this, but I'm just saying, this should happen before, way before a manifestation is going on. Does that make sense? Those should be some intervention you're doing, and that can be done with general ed students as well. Now, when you do an FBA though, when you're getting into that FBA, you do have to get parent consent because it is an assessment. Okay, and the vision in here and all that good stuff. But what we're trying to provide is for you guys to come together as a group, say this is what we're gonna do, and you gotta do a parent survey, and then you talk to your staff and say, okay, well, whoever's working with the kid, you know what, you get along with the parent good, or you speak well with parents, can you give them a call and get this parent? Then we do a student survey, hey, can you do us a favor, you have a good rapport with that child, can you do the student survey, get the most information, then all the teachers will fill out surveys, and you guys come back together, and then you guys talk about, okay, this is what we do, and then you'll do an ABC chart to find out the patterns of behaviors. I will say this though, because we'll give out an ABC, not today, but if you have an ABC chart, you want to get to collect data on your children, as a teacher, you can observe your child all day. You don't need permission to observe your own children that you teach. Does that make sense? So don't feel like, well, I want to get some data on my students, do I need to get permission to do that? No. If they're your kids in your classroom, you can always do that. Now, when you start asking for other help for people to come in, that's something special, that's something different. Then we have to get parent permission to let them know, hey, this is what we're doing. But for your own classroom stuff, if you want to try to get some behavior stuff going on in your classroom, you want to collect data for yourself, hey, please do that, knock yourself out. We actually encourage that, okay? Did that answer a question, Ms. Rosewood? Okay. Anything else real quick?
Well, to piggyback on that, not just the general ed, but as I said, a team approach. And in their first session, one school said they were all relying on their mental health provider to do it, and the mental health provider had a huge list to get done, and she couldn't get them all done because she's also providing services to kids. So that's where that team approach is really important, and it should be, the person ultimately responsible is the case manager, so they should be spearheading that whole thing and making sure everybody gets together.
Yeah, and I know our mental health people are probably the best versed at FBs, so they should help support that as well. Does that make sense? We're not saying, hey, our mental health people are gonna wash their hands of this. No, we understand that your teachers are not familiar with this. We're here to help provide any support that we can. We don't think mental health people should do it all the time, for this reason. And those of you, I know all of you have been in the classroom, and some of us may have done this before. So you have your mental health provider say, okay, I'm gonna conduct the FBA. Boom, great. I know the function of the behavior, I know this, okay. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna write the bib. She writes out the bib, or he writes out the bib. Boom, I have a beautiful bib here. Okay, so here you go as your teacher, I'm gonna give it to you. Oh, thank you. You follow it, you're gonna be great. Awesome, I love it, I love it, I love it. Go on with your day, go on with your week, 6 months down the road, severe behavior happened again. You call Mr. Padilla to come down, hey, this kid needs to be moved into the BICS program. This is just a scenario that I have. That's the behavior intervention classroom in the elementaries. This kid needs to be in the BICS, so I go, okay, teacher, I was like, oh man, this kid's tough. I go, oh, okay. So does he have a behavior intervention? Oh, he sure does, man. I go, well, what are his behaviors? Hold on. All right, it says behavior, so are you doing this? I don't know, this is what I gotta do. Yeah. Okay, I know you're not following it. But that's our fault as a district, letting one person do everything. Because if you don't take ownership in that, why would you follow that? Because a lot of times the teacher will get it and says, I don't do this. This is not what we do in my classroom. So let them have buy-in. So you're sitting there talking about the students saying, hey, these are things that we're doing. Now, it will switch from year to year, but you should still be revisiting that behavior intervention plan to see if there's any changes, or if by any chance, if that's a celebration, we can take it off. Okay, so that, and I know that veers off a little bit of the manifestations, but it does talk about the MBs, how we want to make sure that everybody's involved, and we're not just giving it to one person, because that hasn't been working as great as we would like.
Let me piggyback,
That's yours.
taking
Who's
off
yours?
a behavior plan. I had, right at the end of the year, I went to a manifest, and the young man had moved schools 3 times in the spring semester. He was at one school, like January, February, moved somewhere else, the end of February for March and part of April, and his IEP was due in that March to April time. Well, that school hadn't seen the behavior, so they took off the behavior intervention plan. Had a list of behaviors for Miles and Synergy, and they didn't see him in those few weeks, which also included spring break, by the way. The short time that it was at the school, so they decided that we haven't seen that behavior, we're gonna take off the behavior intervention plan. The kid went back to his original school halfway through April and the end of May, got in trouble, and there was no behavior intervention plan for the behavior. So I would caution your case managers, your leads, to removing behavior intervention plans probably needs to be a little longer than 5 weeks. Because
honeymoon does happen.
yeah, this kid did have behavior, but it was documented on the prior written notice. We're dismissing the behavior intervention plan because we haven't seen the behavior. And I was kind of floored by that, so just, I would be cautious about taking off the behavior intervention plan after a short amount of time.
And if it does, great, that's a celebration, hey, and you tell that to the parents. The only reason I wouldn't take off a behavior intervention plan if the kid is doing good, if there's something that we're doing that everybody needs to know, and that's making the kid successful. Then that BIP should probably stay in place, so no matter where they go, they have to understand, hey, when you approach this student, don't approach them from behind, because they have a tendency to have jumpy and have that anxiety, and they may turn around and swing at you. That, hey, you know what, that's something that we may want to keep in there, unless he's totally over that, but it's different. Go ahead.
So, talking about entering incident reports into Synergy. This is one thing that we have been dinged on for a couple of years now, and even now, it's not happening at every school. And we've been told, when our data, people went to the STARS conference in April, when they do count days this next school year, not only are they gonna pull counts and look at overdue IEPs and evaluations, but they're also going to be looking at behavior incidences, because we never make our indicator for a 4B, which is the rate of suspensions for students in special ed, as well as students who are race and ethnicity. So they're gonna start pulling that suspension data on count days rather than just once a year. So that's just a heads up to you guys. But it's important to enter for all students, not just special ed students, because it skews the data. We have, last year, 2 school years ago, I was walking an administrator through entering a discipline referral into Synergy, and she says, well, I'll just go back and put all the special ed ones in. And I was like, no, please put them all in, because otherwise it looks like we're just suspending special ed kids.
And they'll go to that, but then it gets into a whole corrective action plan that we have to go within that campus, and it's gonna look like, oh, the only kids you're suspending are kids with special needs, and we don't wanna go down that civil rights kind of lane. So make sure, that's not a general ed, that's not a special ed function, that's anytime you have the incidents report, let's get them in there, because it will look skewed if only people that you're doing are Hispanic education, ethnic minorities.
And it is a general ed function, but because it comes back on the special ed indicators, that's why we're trying to get the message out there as much as possible. So just making sure that you put in the type of incident. And these are the major offenses. Some of the little ones that schools don't necessarily have to put in, but those major ones where they're actually having days out of school, those are the important ones. The type of incident, the start and end dates, the number of school days suspended. That doesn't include weekends and holidays. So some principals will say, I'm suspending them for 10 days, but when they put the dates in, it's like 14 days. Because they're counting, principals are counting, the system and what principals are counting are off, and so they're counting, the system counts the weekends or something, I can't remember now. They're working on that piece, but just making sure that it's just school days. And then the description of the violation is important, because when we do get a state complaint or we have the PED audit us again, we have to talk about that. So this is just an example of what it looks like, suspension for 6 days, 5/19 to 5/25, or 5 days, sorry, I read that wrong. I took off the staff member's name because this was a recent one that I did right at the end of the year. There's also space within the system to give more information about that referral. And I know Joe Chavez has done several trainings, I'm sure he'll do more next year, but if you have questions about it, you can always contact. It's our state performance indicators, that's 4A, 4B, like I was saying, it's for the rates of suspension and expulsion for students with disabilities, and by race and ethnicity. That's why it's important that we enter for all students. Otherwise, when data is collected, the numbers are skewed. And one of the other things that comes out of this is, last year when we were audited, is that we have to follow the 10-day rule, which is the next slide, I believe.
And we briefly talked about the 10-day rule. Now remember, that 10-day rule is whenever we change placement of the student, the parents have to do, or the child has to due process right for us to determine why we're removing them from that placement. Okay, and that's the services that, when I say placement, it's the services the kid is getting. Okay, so remember, if you have 8 days, we don't have to do that manifestation, but as soon as you know you're going over that 10th day, we have that, okay? So again, if you have 2 days, 2 days, 2 days, 2 days, that may trigger that if you go over that 10th day, okay? In school suspensions, here's one that we didn't go over, bus transportation. If they get suspended from the school bus, that counts as a suspension.
If
Even we didn't give it. If it's a special ed bus,
If they have on their IEP that they're supposed to be on a special ed bus. If they're on a general ed bus and they get suspended, that's not a suspension,
Yeah.
because that's not a service, but the special ed bus is a service that we offer. So if they're suspended from a special ed bus, it is a suspension. If they can't get to school another way.
Right. Yeah, so hopefully sometimes the parents will bring them, but that way sometimes we have to get with STS and really make sure that they understand that, hey, when you suspend a kid and they don't show up to our campus, guess what? It's gonna count, we have to count those days.
So we do a manifest bus suspension.
Yes. And we can say if it's due or not due to the disability, and again, that's all we do. We have to make sure, hey, we're talking to the parents about this. Hey, was the reason they got kicked off the bus due to their disability or not? And usually when it gets to that point, we'll have to talk to the bus company, and we can probably get them back on the bus. But that's a discussion we'll have.
Yeah, and I've been doing transportation for the last 3 years, so I usually can get in and talk with the bus company, and they're pretty reasonable with me. I'll be giving that up next year to giving it to one of my colleagues, so they'll have to build that rapport, but they're usually pretty reasonable. We did a big PD with all the bus drivers in January, and just kind of gave them some ideas, and it seems to have been better, but some of their suspensions, the young lady at your school, had nothing to do with even behavior. It was just her not coming out and getting on the bus. And so they told her she couldn't ride the bus anymore. And she was at a school that's not her home school because of the nature of her disability, and it was a big old mess, but.
It always happens. And then
So-
also ISI, I know, do you want to go over ISI? For in-school suspension, if they're not still getting their special ed support in those ISSs, then guess what? It's counted on their days. If you're making sure they provided all the related services, and this is something that it's a general ed kind of function, everybody does this, then we don't have to count those days in ISS. Okay, so they're seeing their psych, they still have to see all those people, they still have to have access to their curriculum, all that stuff. So you could do that if you're doing an ISS with all your kids, because they'll have that general curriculum stuff going on. But make sure everything on their IEP, they're still getting that support.
How do you prove that, or how do you, because when you put it in the system as ISS, and it's gonna show as it's gonna count towards their days.
So when I'm thinking when we write it into, I started doing this towards the end of the year because I had thought about that question. I started writing it into the prior written notice, the student will be in ISI receiving services per their IEP.
And make sure it's getting done. It's because we will be called on that eventually.
How do
We have to
you do
get-
that, though? That's the question. I mean, how do you, like, if the kid has 225 minutes of inclusion support, you know?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how are you gonna provide that in an ISI setting?
Let's say your ISI teacher is a gen ed teacher and the special ed teacher comes in and does some individual one-on-one support within that ISI setting for a little while, you could count that.
He won't get the full 240, but we're still providing that special ed support.
What if the
That's a
teacher
good
goes
deal.
in as an inclusion teacher, but doesn't necessarily,
As long as she's in communication, the way I would look at it, as long as they're in communication with their, with the case manager, whoever's providing that support, because that's how inclusion can work anyway. Inclusion doesn't have to be a person in the classroom, as long as you're collaborating with that special ed teacher.
And your mental health providers and your speech language pathologists then have access to the students while they're in ISI as well, so then they're able to provide those services.
Which mental health probably should be seeing them during that time anyway, because they should be talking about that infraction.
So
I'm
go
not
back to
gonna do
that
that.
whole time, you were saying that, like, let's say the student has 225 minutes, they get, say, 100 of those minutes, we still count that as they did receive services, even though it's the full time, because I know that's been a discussion between one of our case managers, she had.
As of right now, I would do that,
You
yes.
would, okay, she had students in a self-contained classroom, so we would have to suspend them. We would either put them in our AU class, or would that,
We'll have to look into that, I guess I'll have to look deeper into that.
okay, because she felt that he needed to get his full.
I know in the high school, or at least they used to, you guys have like a whole ISI class, correct, or you guys don't have that?
We don't do it what they feel.
Okay, and here's my thing, if you can't provide that support, send them home. Because then you have to create a class then. Say, hey, this is how we're dealing with all of it. So I would just say, hey, well then, I'm not gonna deal with it, go home and then.
But if you're over the 10 days of suspension, you have to owe compensatory, which is
Yes.
what this is really about. The first 10 days of suspension, it's free, we don't have to owe them anything. But anything above 10, we have to make sure that they're still receiving access to the services, so they're making progress on their IEP goals. Otherwise, they could fall farther and farther behind. So, we were saying a year ago, we were saying, yeah, we're offering compensatory services and we're putting on the private, but to Fred's point, how are we proving that? So about February, March, I should say, this year, we kind of got asked, well, how did you offer that compensatory last year? So, I sat there and I created a log really quick. And, it's the date, the time in, the time out, the student signs, and the teacher or administrator or whoever, says staff, is the one providing that service, signs off. So this is for, let's say, Johnny. And we have his ID number. And then we told Johnny he can come in before or after school for 30 minutes. And starting tomorrow, okay? So Johnny, we have tomorrow, Johnny's supposed to be here. Johnny doesn't show up, staff puts no show, signs off. Then he shows up after school tomorrow, they sign off. Once they've made up the time that we owe, or they don't show up, it's the end of the year, you can have your lead or your case manager scan this into historical documents, or they can send it downtown. I scanned one for one of my schools and loaded it into historical documents, so that when PED comes back and said, okay, you said you're gonna offer Johnny compensatory services, how did you do it? I can just pull up this log, signed by him, signed by the staff member completing that, and prove it.
And we thought we were good with just I thought I was good, because I remember we did it at Picanto when I was working with them, and I was like, we're solid, I go, pull our numbers, go ahead.
Yeah.
We did, we put it on the prior written notice, we're solid. And they go, well, you don't have signatures. I go, no, we don't.
So that's where this came from.
Yeah, so.
You know, they put warning labels and you don't.
It wasn't a lot, but we
prior
did
to
have some, I remember,
bathtub.
I was excited, I was like, yes, bring on the
I think we're
audit,
getting
until they
more
sent for
paper.
signatures, I was like, never mind, don't do that.
So, a question to the ISI thing, though, Taryn. If, can you err on the side of caution, I guess, to say, and can you go ahead and count that as a suspension day if you're gonna put them in ISI for
Yes.
whatever reason?
That's
Say
what
a
we-
parent's not available to come pick them up or something, and we place them in ISI, can we go ahead and just, is it like at our principal's discretion to count whether that counts or not, or? In
Yes.
other words, like, let's say we didn't do that.
Yeah, say, hey, we want them, we're suspending them, it's half a day, or what, it's 10 a.m. in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Parents not coming, so we're not gonna pick him with our
Right,
regulars.
so you gotta
We
place
put them in an ISI, yes,
Mhm.
count that as a full suspension.
Okay.
And then guess what? He's gonna stay home the following
Right.
2 days or whatever it is.
Well,
Yes.
right, because your psych might not be able to get to see them, or
Yeah.
it's not their, whatever. So,
We've got information in this, Karen. So here's the scenario, because I think we have like 8 minutes. So Peter has been suspended for 7 days so far this year for using foul language with students and teachers. Today, he was suspended for bringing a gun on campus and showing it to his friends during lunch. The school asked for the 10 days of suspension, waiting for a long-term hearing. What should those next steps be? Suspended, right, so, manifest determination,
FBA.
that could be one, yes. Anything else? Okay, that could be. Think about some of the things we talked about so far today. That would be the manifest determination, yes. I put some things up here, so let me. So schedule the manifest, enter the incident into synergy.
Because you know it's gonna go past, if they bring a weapon, you know we're gonna spend more than 10 days. That's not a question. The good thing is, hey, if it's due to disability or not, we know we're gonna do 45. I mean, we know this is not gonna just be swept under the rug. Because that, in this situation, it was done, right?
Discuss compensatory services. Currently, right now, we're looking at 7 days because he said 7 days. We're looking at adding 10, that'd be 17. So we go for at least the 7 days, possibly, unless the manifest and the hearing all happen in that short amount of time. And then request an FBA and BIP if necessary. Anything else that could be is he sped? Look at that question that came out earlier. So we have just a few minutes. Are there any specific questions, anything that anything else that you guys have thought of?
And it really is, I think other than maybe our leads in the high school and in the middle school, do they really have a good grasp and master on this because they deal with it all the time? We understand sometimes as an administrator, hey, you have so many things going on, just give us a call with any, if you guys need any support. I mean, we try to be there as much as you can. I think with the new process that we're doing with now the SSAs, I think that's gonna give us more time within the schools from elementary all the way through our high school, and I think that would be a good thing, so you could bounce things more off us. I know with me, if I want to get involved more with my assistant principal than I've been doing, because I want to make sure I'm giving them direct information, even though I know you guys are extremely busy, but I think that would be good for you guys to have that, the special ed side, okay?
I have a question / clarification. So
Awesome.
you know that the situation, suspended led up to 10 days, manifest, determined it was not part of her disability, returned from suspension, got suspended the day she got back, suspended her, got suspended again the day she came back. So what I failed to do, I should have had a manifest at day 11, at day.
Yes, every single time.
And because this whole time we're pending a long-term.
Good question, yeah, because that's their due process, right? Anytime you suspend a kid after that the 10 days that they went over that 10-day rule, now, and I tell the parents that, hey, we always talk to the kid if they're coming back to school, because we're not always looking for a long-term. And I tell the parents, hey, you know what? Every time your son gets in trouble now that he may have to get suspended, we have to have another one of these meetings. And I try to talk to the kid and try to let him know that you didn't really get off here, because I think that's how they feel sometimes, got off. I've had parents go, yes, when we failed to do something on the IEP. I'm like, well, wait a minute, he brought us to school, like this is not a yes moment. But it's really trying to say, hey, you did make a mistake here, you need to make sure we're not back to this point. So, but that was a very good question. Yeah, every time you're after that 10th day, we have to have that manifest now every single time. So hopefully it would be more than once or twice.
These were stacked on top of each other.
Well, this girl just kept on, yeah. But we still have to, we remember it, and they were really trying to, hey, we're gonna give them an opportunity to get all their education, so we're not gonna send them home, we're gonna keep them here. And then she comes back and she does a nice thing, I think I told her, the student's not gonna hold us hostage. Let's go do a manifest, get her, get her out of the environment, and then we'll bring her back.
So you're not saying do a manifest prior to suspension, you can still suspend but do the manifest, right?
Yeah, but we need to do that right away. We don't hold it off and, try to get it done right away, so we need to make sure we give that parent that due process right.
That's, he's saying rights, parents should always get a copy of their rights, especially at a discipline meeting, so parent rights should always be offered. I think, are we good?
Don't worry, I got time, but I'm talking over here.
Okay, we got 3 minutes. Are there any other questions? No, we appreciate you guys being here today. We don't get a chance to get with principals and do group things very often. And we know that a lot of administrators have been asking for support with special ed things, that Mr. Brewer and I have talked about that. And so we just took the opportunity to be able to do that today and figuring out a way to give you a lot of information in a short amount of time. We appreciate you being here.
And I think also the good thing about, the SSAs and us being in the buildings a little bit more, it's funny because I always thought I was in the buildings, but that easily even allowed me more time, is that now we can be the ones that are doing PD for your special ed staff and your general ed staff, rather than having our leads do that. So that's why it's coming directly to us. I think that's gonna really be beneficial. I'm hoping it is at least, but that's what we're looking at, for that PD, that support at the school level. We're really kind of opening ourselves to be there a little bit longer than what we've been in the past. So I'm excited about it. I think it's gonna work out great.
He keeps alluding to that. You're gonna hear about that this afternoon back at the big group
Oh,
session.
we have a-
Our roles are changing, our titles are changing, and so.
Thought everybody,
Find out more SSA.
SSSA,
Find out
yes.
what our school
Yes,
SSA is.
you should.
Okay.
We have some positions that are posted, so you should find out something. We have a list of all those. We'll give them out.
I was okay with saying that, right, where we're going?
Yes.
Okay. He was giving me a dirty look.
So yes.
No. All right. Hey, guys, we have 1 minute. We're gonna wait so we don't bother any of the other people. We started, we left off too early.
If you have questions for either one of us, please let us know. This is what, we actually live and breathe manifest probably more than you guys.
What is the term you're saying?
It's ass
Special, don't say that. Special Student Services
administrators.
Administrators.
So triple SA, that's your title.
Triple SA, that's what it is. Triple SA. Or, we've been joking amongst ourselves, it is